There's a move so subtle, so silent, that when you make it, they don't resist you, they beg for you. Not because you forced them, not because you chased them, but because you did the one thing Machiavelli said would flip the power dynamic instantly. It's not kindness, it's not confidence, it's something far colder and far more effective. Machiavelli understood human nature at its rawest. People don't respond to noise, they respond to gaps, to silence, to withdrawal. When you remove yourself strategically, when you create space with calculated calm, people feel the loss before they understand it. And the moment they start feeling your absence more than they ever appreciated your presence, control shifts. Today, you'll learn how to make that shift happen on your terms. We've all been there, overextending, over-explaining, trying to prove we're worth staying for. You message them first. You show up. You ask how they're doing. You think consistency builds connection. But instead, they drift. They take longer to respond. They sense your hunger. And hunger, Machiavelli warned, is the scent of weakness. Because in the game of power, the one who desires less always controls more. Now you're invisible. Not because you changed, but because they've adjusted to your presence. They expect it. They predict it. And eventually they devalue it. This isn't about love, or respect, or loyalty. It's about leverage. And unless you know when to pull back, to disappear, and to re-emerge with intention, you'll keep feeding people who only value what walks away. Machiavelli didn't just observe rulers, he dissected them. He knew that control doesn't come from loud declarations or desperate presence. It comes from restraint, from the tension of absence. When you're always available, always proving, always performing, you remove all mystery. You become predictable, and predictability kills influence. The moment someone feels they've figured you out, their brain stops chasing. Their respect plateaus. Your emotional stock begins to collapse. That's when you must become unavailable. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but with surgical precision. Most people think control comes from dominance. But Machiavelli saw that the most ruthless kings won not through force, but through illusion. Illusion of scarcity, of distance. When you vanish just slightly, people begin to project. They wonder where you are, what you're thinking, why you stop trying. Their mind fills in the gaps, and those gaps become more powerful than your words ever were. You become valuable not because you shouted, but because you stepped back and let them feel the silence. There's a line in The Prince that echoes this truth. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But fear, in this context, isn't about intimidation. It's about emotional unpredictability. When they don't know if they have you, when they sense that your attention is a privilege, not a guarantee, they start adjusting, they become careful, they chase. You don't need to yell. You don't need to fight. You simply let the law of absence do its work. But there's danger here too. Disappear too soon and you're forgotten. Disappear without value and you're dismissed. Machiavelli would advise calculation, not withdrawal for ego, but withdrawal for effect. You must first offer value, create presence, then remove it. That gap is where the obsession begins. The brain notices the drop, and what the brain notices, it starts to crave. This tactic works not just in romance, but in business, leadership, even social status. It's the consultant who suddenly becomes booked, the artist who stops sharing every sketch, the friend who doesn't always reply. Their silence becomes louder than your noise. Their scarcity becomes a magnet. And in a world addicted to validation, the one who withholds with precision becomes the one everyone watches. Machiavelli didn't write to inspire. He wrote to expose. In a world of kings, cardinals, traitors, and tyrants, he saw that kindness without strategy is suicide. He believed the most effective leaders were not the most loved, but the most calculated. Power, in his eyes, was not a product of morality, it was a product of perception. And perception is governed not by what you say, but by what you withhold. The man who knows how to limit his words, his presence, his emotions, holds the strings while everyone else performs. In The Prince, Machiavelli tells us that it is safer to be feared than loved. But his idea of fear wasn't brutality, it was psychological leverage. The ability to make others doubt their position in your world, to keep them guessing. Not with chaos, but with emotional restraint. A prince who is always kind is predictable. A prince who vanishes at the peak of admiration becomes unforgettable. That contrast burns deeper than any consistent affection. Power in Machiavelli's worldview is not about domination, it's about timing. Most people make the mistake of overexposure. They flood others with attention, gifts, approval. And in doing so, they teach others to take them for granted. But when you pull away just enough, when you disrupt the rhythm, you force a recalibration. The other begins to chase not because you demanded it, but because you broke their expectation. And in that crack, they fall. The brilliance of Machiavelli lies in how he reveals the human craving for control, and how easily that craving can be reversed. The moment you stop trying to hold someone, and instead create the illusion that you might slip away, the power shifts. Suddenly they're watching you, measuring their words, seeking signs, and you haven't said a word. This isn't manipulation in the way we think of deception. Machiavelli's trick is awareness of your value, your presence, and your silence. He taught that silence is a sword, that vanishing at the right moment is louder than begging to be seen. He taught that power lives not in confrontation, but in control of the stage. And when you remove yourself at the perfect moment, the world doesn't forget you. It follows. What happens when you stop answering right away, when you delay that message? When you cancel that meeting? At first, they may act indifferent, trained by your old patterns to expect you'll return. But as time passes and your silence holds, something else ignites: insecurity. They begin to question the stability they once took for granted. Did I do something wrong? Are they losing interest? The brain doesn't like uncertainty. And in that discomfort, obsession begins to brew. They check your status. They reread old messages. They remember things you said but they dismissed. You've become a mystery again, and mystery is magnetic. The tragedy of overavailability is that it leaves nothing to the imagination. By contrast, Machiavelli's method teaches that strategic absence triggers reflection. Reflection triggers longing. Longing triggers pursuit, and pursuit gives you leverage. But here's where it sharpens. Not everyone can pull this off. If you disappear too soon, you're irrelevant. If you disappear too late, you're desperate. The key is to create emotional surplus before you withdraw, to make your presence so meaningful, so vivid, that your absence rings like a bell. It's the friend who always listened, who suddenly stops calling. The partner who once flooded you with affection, now calm and still. In the quiet, the mind races. In the vacuum, attachment forms. The timing must be unnatural. Not rude, not ghosting, elegant silence. You vanish just when they felt closest to you. Not to hurt, but to influence. Not to punish, but to disturb the pattern. That disturbance lingers. That subtle interruption creates questions that have no answers. And humans chase closure far more than they chase comfort. By the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. You've occupied their mental space. Not as a memory, but as a presence that haunts. And it all began because you dared to stop showing up like everyone else. You stopped chasing, you started controlling the frame. And now the same people who ignored your efforts are desperate for your return. It's a paradox of human desire. The more you give, the less you're noticed. The more you pull away, intentionally, strategically, the more they start to lean in. This isn't cruelty. It's gravity. And once you understand this gravitational pull, you realize that control isn't about domination. It's about becoming the axis around which others spin. Machiavelli never told you to be a tyrant. He told you to become necessary. And nothing is more necessary than what you fear you've lost. Psychologically, people don't value what's there. They value what might leave. Our minds are wired to overestimate what we can't predict. When you show up every day, say yes to everything, explain every emotion, you become familiar. Familiar becomes background noise. But once you remove yourself, even slightly, your silhouette becomes sharper. You become a concept, not just a person. And concepts are addictive. When they start overanalyzing your silence, imagining your reasons, creating stories around your behavior, you've won. Not because you manipulated them, but because you restructured the emotional dynamic. You've introduced uncertainty, and uncertainty opens the door to obsession. It's the lover who suddenly grows quiet. The mentor who becomes distant. The artist who stops posting. The absence becomes the message. What people fear most is not rejection, it's insignificance. And Machiavelli understood that the most terrifying power is not in punishing someone, but in making them question whether they matter to you at all. That doubt erodes their confidence. That pause becomes louder than confrontation. While they try to rebuild what they had with you, you stand still, unbothered, unmoved, in control. They spiral. You rise. And once the spiral starts, it feeds itself. They reach out more. They speak softer. They try harder. All for the chance to regain your presence. Not because of who you are, but because of the space you left. Machiavelli's law of absence isn't just about silence. It's about creating an emotional vacuum that demands to be filled. And by refusing to fill it, you become the one thing they can't stop thinking about. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to chase to be wanted. Power lives in the one who can leave and still be followed. The greatest trick Machiavelli ever revealed wasn't how to conquer others, but how to make them conquer themselves, just to stay in your orbit. And that doesn't require force, just precision, just absence. The world is filled with noise, but silence, when used correctly, echoes louder than any demand. They'll call it cold. They'll call it manipulative. But they'll still check their phone for your name. They'll still wonder why your energy shifted. And they'll still move closer, even when you didn't ask. So stop begging, stop proving, withdraw with elegance, let your silence speak. And watch them come back, not out of guilt, but out of need. Because they never valued you more than when they thought they had lost you.